environment. Man with a plan, another breath of fresh air in an otherwise stale environment. Congressman, 5th District, Virginia, Tom Garrett. Congressman Garrett, good to have you with us.
I just thought I'd start with a pregnant pause to make you wonder if I was there. How are you, John?
I know, that was pretty good. And by the way, Tom Garrett and us, unbeknownst to each other, we just found out we're neighbors. My studio here, a mere 3 blocks from the Garrett abode in D.C., right by the Capitol. So, Tom, I said you got to stop by with your family one night.
Well, if I had known that there were Twinkies for everyone, yeah, there's a good chance, right?
There are Twinkies. Yeah. We do stock Twinkies because they never go bad. You know that? They shot them into space. Twinkies are for life. They have no expiration date.
Look, the 4th anniversary, I think, is the Twinkie anniversary.
That's right, the Twinkie anniversary, exactly, when they shot him into space. All right, well, we love our Twinkies. Obviously, if you looked at my midsection, you would have no doubt that I do partake in a Twinkie, even a fried Twinkie every so often, as gross as that may seem. Anyway, let's get off that. It's too early. So government shutdown, you guys did the job. Now what happens?
Well, here's what I think is going to happen. And you're about to enter a spin-free zone. Pardon me, royalties to whoever said that first. I think we're going to send a pretty decent piece of legislation over to the Senate, which I voted for in good faith, that would extend funding for community health centers for 2 years, which is a real success story in providing affordable care. That would ensure funding for our military through the fiscal year, so that we didn't leave our commanders in a position of deciding between toilet papers and bullets. And I think what we're going to get back is something where they gut the military portion and then stick in probably disaster relief to ensure the votes of Republican reps from Texas and Puerto Rico and Florida. And yes, the non-voting member from Puerto Rico is a Republican. And also to push the deficit spending over $1 trillion this year. And then I think what you'll see is a bunch of people who voted for the common sense budget short term, which irritates me, but that's another subject, say heck no, and then the Democrats go, yippee, it's over $1 trillion in spending, and but, you know, I got to operate in good faith. I can't legislate based on hypotheticals. So, yes, we've done our job. Again, the solution, though, is for the Senate to act on the 12 separate budget packages that we passed back in 2017, which they haven't touched any of them, so that we get away from this continuing resolution, kick the can down the road to create a false sense of urgency, to get people to hold their noses and vote for bad stuff because there's a good nugget inside of it. And so that's where I think we're going to be. I think you're going to see the Senate send us something back that doesn't look like what we sent over, and that pushes spending ever higher, and it's frustrating. But what do? Do you vote against the good bill because you think you might get back a bad bill? So I guess I'm tipping my hand. If we get back from the Senate, what I think we're going to get back from the Senate, I'm not a no, I'm a hell no.
So what you think, Congressman Tom Garrett, you're going to get back from the Senate? Describe what you're going to vote no on.
So I think, and again, we're playing hypotheticals here, but
yes,
I voted yes for a bill that would have ensured funding for our women and men in uniform in our community health centers, amongst other things. But I think the Senate will probably gut the military portion, put in a significant increase in domestic spending, put in an increase in the debt ceiling that'll probably guarantee us $1 trillion in deficit spending this year, as well as, here's the carrot, right, to go with the stick, disaster relief money for Florida, Texas, Puerto Rico, the Virgin Islands. And I think what you'll see is the people who are fiscal conservatives say, yeah, this isn't how we should be doing this. They'll defect, but then you'll pick up the votes of a lot of Democrats who like the increased spending on social programs.
Mm-hmm. So
it's a ping pong game. We just put the ball in serve, relatively soft to the Senate, based on what my good friend Senator Schumer said yesterday. I had to steel myself for that one. I think he thinks he's going to hijack this process and stick a bunch of pork in there and increase the spending limits so that they can essentially pander to some folks.
All right. So, and the Democrats' view would be, if you're going to increase, I mean, is they're thinking, if you're going to increase defense spending by $10 billion, then we want a complementary increase in domestic spending. I mean, is that the overall bigger picture for them?
If I had to boil it down, that's a pretty succinct way to put it.
I love being succinct. So they want a dollar for
It's
dollar
your
match.
middle name. It's John S. Fredericks, right?
That's right. Succinct, right? Because I learned that a long time ago. I grew up with a severe stutter, and I learned that as difficult as it was to speak, if I wanted to get my point across, I had to do it very saliently and quickly. So that's how I got to see. There's a silver lining, Tom Garrett, to every dark cloud out there if you just can find it, whatever that may be, right? And then, so it goes back to the House. If they do this, you guys are going to vote no. I don't think you'll pass it, right? Because the whole Freedom
Caucus. We'll pass it. What will happen is you'll hold every Republican from Florida and Texas because of the disaster relief money. They don't want to vote no to that. And then all the Democrats that will oppose the measure that does defense spending and community health centers, they're going to vote against that. Then when this Schumer bill comes back, because again, the Byrd rule is killing us. And again, I want to be clear: the Byrd rule isn't the filibuster. It's not some foundational concept that was given to us by the founders. The Byrd rule is younger than me, and I ain't that old. But they can't get 60 votes without throwing in a bunch of pork. So this is what they'll be to get 60 votes on in the Senate. And then again, you find yourself with a bunch of Republican defectors, ironically, on the return of the serve. But now the Democrats will come on board and it'll pass. Wait for it. I mean, I don't have a crystal ball, but mark it down. We're going to send something over. We already did. That looks out for men and women in uniform and community health centers. They're going to send something back that blows up the federal budget. Then they're going to go look at Trump's budgetary spending.
So if that passes, then that's going to drive the deficit even further. That's going to drive the debt and the deficit even further, right?
Well, the bad news is that you should never spend beyond your means. The good news is that if anyone pays attention to history, President Obama set a pretty high bar by growing the debt more than every other president in U.S. history combined.
Right.
Now, having said that, you know, nobody knows history, it appears, because the market plunged 1,500 points and everybody went, oh, look how bad the Trump economy is. But I think the thing's up 5,000 points since he was elected. It's still been a sort of breakneck increase in the amount of money that people have in their retirement accounts. And nobody gives credit for the 5,000-point increase, but they sure do give blame for the 1,500-point drop, which, by the way, has been mitigated down to 1,000. So we're still up 25% in a year.
That's pretty amazing. Let's get to the comment that the president made, which I thought was very funny the other day when he simply said, tongue-in-cheek, hey, look, you know, those Democrats that were not standing and not clapping during my State of the Union speech when I was heralding all these great economic gains that we have, it's kind of treasonous, right? It's like treason. And everybody laughed. I thought it was pretty funny when I heard it live. But now the Democrats are making speeches, like you say, in the Senate, right? They can't pass a budget. They can't take up any of your budget resolutions, but they have time to make speeches in the well with two people there, and C-SPAN blasting the president, saying that words matter and you can't say it's treasonous and he's poisoning our dialogue and the Soviets are the Russians are laughing at us.
I just find it really funny, and I'm going to go on a tangent here a little bit.
Go ahead.
That Adam Schiff, Democrat ranking member on the House Intelligence Committee, who's been crying like a baby over Russia collusion for the last year, just got caught with his proverbial pants around his ankles speaking to Russian pranksters about obtaining blackmail-like photos of President Trump that didn't exist, and said, well, I knew it was a joke, but then had his office follow up with a series of like 17 pages worth of emails trying to procure said photos from what he believed to be agents of a foreign government. You know, show me what collusion with a foreign government to influence U.S. election looks like. This is what collusion with a foreign government to influence an election looks like.
Yeah, Adam Schiff.
And nobody, I mean, it's like crickets, man.
I mean, not a word, right? Could you imagine if that was a Republican that did that and it was against Clinton?
Kennedy sent a letter to the Russian premier saying, I will help you defeat Reagan in the next election. We need to work together. That's treasonous.
Yep.
Without reservation, without hyperbole, that's treasonous.
Yep.
That's collusion with the Russians, and nobody's saying a word.
Right, well, that was in 1980, right? When
83. But the Democrats worked with the Russians in concert, hand in hand, in 80 and 84 through Russian-funded nuclear freeze movement efforts, et cetera, to defeat Reagan. And there's been Russian meddling in every American election since 1919. I'm not saying it's okay. And there was Russian meddling in this election, let me be clear. But lest we stand too long on our soapbox, if you Google search U.S. interference in foreign elections, the first story will be the L.A. Times story from September 21st, 2016, about 84 elections we meddled in. President Obama meddled openly in Brexit. He meddled openly in the Israeli elections in 09 and 15. I don't even mind us meddling in our enemies' elections, but I can't figure out why we're meddling in our friends' elections.
And again, on that, right? No coverage, nothing. Like, that's fine. It's fine if our CIA meddles. It's fine if our CIA overturns governments. It's fine if we meddle in elections. But Russians spend $150,000 or something on a Facebook post, and all of a sudden it's, the end of our democracy. By the way,
the Russian expenditure that we know about pales in comparison to the $9.2 million the DNC and Hillary Clinton campaign gave to Fusion GPS, apparently to fabricate stories to influence an election. In concert with the Ukrainians, right? And obviously the Ukrainians are better folks on the global stage than the Russians, but that doesn't make collusion okay.
Congressman, so now we have a second dossier, right? We got the first dossier. Now we have a second memo coming out. We've got a Democratic counter memo coming out. Let me just ask a straight-up question. I don't know what the Democratic counter memo, spin memo is, but here's my question. Who cares? Either government officials went to this FISA court judge and lied to them or not. They either misrepresented the truth in order to get the warrant or not. And if they didn't, then this is all to do about nothing. And if they did, then they better pack a toothbrush. Why is this so confusing for so many people?
Well, here's your newsmaker moment. I would call for the release of the affidavit used in the application for the FISA memo. Then we'll get to the bottom of this he said, she said. Release the affidavit that was used to apply for the FISA warrant. Boom, we're done. I have read the Democrat memo. A little irony for you is last time I checked, 71 Republicans had read the Democrat memo, and about 40% fewer Democrats had read the Democrat memo. I can't talk about the contents, but I'll tell you that on TV the other day, Democrat Congressman Adam Smith said, look, we didn't rely entirely on the dossier, which obviously by implication implies that they did rely somewhat on the false dossier. So that, there's your truth coming straight out of a Democrat's mouth.
So release the
affidavit. You can't rely on something you know to be materially false and influenced by money and influenced by prejudice. That's not how probable cause works when applying for a warrant.
I like what you're saying, release the affidavit, because that's going to clear everything up. Can you do that?
That's right. The affidavit is contemporaneous in time to the events that were occurring, and that'll tell us whether or not they relied on a false and salacious memo funded by Democrat campaign money.
How do you get that released?
To influence an American election in concert with the federal government.
How do you get it done? How do you get it released? What's the process?
Well, what the process is for folks like me to start calling for the release of the affidavit, which I would love to tell you that yours is the first show I've said it on, but I think I've been saying it for a few days now. But we have a document. Now, look, okay, we don't want to compromise national security. Well, here's what we know. Everybody knows we have a FISA court. Everybody knows the process by which individuals apply to the FISA court to surveil American citizens and foreign nationals. Everybody knows the allegations. So if you need to redact a line or two of the affidavit so that we don't compromise specific sources or methods, go ahead. But there's no secrets in this memo, for the most part, that we would be compromising. The only thing in that memo, the affidavit, that the American public doesn't know is the unbridled, nonpartisan truth.
So the judge who signed this first warrant at the FISA court, right? That secret judge, we don't know who it is, and I'm not going to speculate, although we do think it's Contreras, but we don't know. Now, what would it take to get the judge to testify? Because to me, all the judge has to say is, yeah, I would have signed the warrant even without the dossier, and so it really doesn't matter. That was just part of what they presented.
It does matter. It does matter because what is Manafort charged with? What do we have Papadopoulos charged with? These are process crimes. So even if you would have signed the warrant without the dossier, if they relied on the dossier and essentially lied to the court, they've violated the law. And so it matters because that's a process crime, and process crimes matter because rule of law matters.
And the other hand is that if the judge in the FISA court says, you know what, which is the same thing that FBI Deputy Director Dan McCabe said under oath, which is, if I didn't have this information, there's no way I would have signed this warrant. I mean, you still broke the law, but then that brings into question the special counsel, the whole thing, right?
Well, it brings into question the integrity of the system upon which Americans rely so that they can go to bed at night not afraid for their privacy and their due process rights. So that, to me, is the scandal here. Let's get this away from Trump and politics and into a realm where it's probable, I would say, that the federal government colluded with political entities to violate the rights of Americans in order to gain a political outcome. This is Watergate, except worse, because the people in Watergate were political hacks. These are employees of the federal government entrusted to uphold the very laws that they violated. That's why Democrats should give a darn, too.
I've been saying that since this came out. I just don't see this as a partisan issue. And I'm really
It
shocked
shouldn't be, but by gosh,
be.
the hyper-partisan era. I am so honored to stand next to Democrats Jerry Nadler, Zoe Lofgren, Ted Lieu, and Ron Wyden, as well as Rand Paul and Jim Jordan and Justin Amash, to stand up for the privacy rights of Americans in demanding extra safeguards on the Foreign Intelligence Surveillance Act. But they're crickets now when it comes to those people when they see the actual violation thereof. And that's scary.
It's scary, and it's really sick, and it's a sad time in our republic when we have this going on. I think hashtag release the affidavit. Let's start that. I'm going to tweet it out right now as soon as we get off. Tom Garrett, thanks for being with us. Congressman Tom Garrett, 5th District, Virginia, Republican. Hashtag release the affidavit. Thanks for being with us.
That would be the affidavit undergirding the FISA warrant application. That'll clear everything